new location. Finally figured out where to film my videos and have them looking nicer, because the lighting today, this is natural lighting, my windows behind me, is looking absolutely amazing, and it is 5 o'clock in the evening, so I now know when to film my video and where. This background won't always be messy, it just is today because I've spent the whole day cleaning it. And also, upgrade from my last video, I've got my microphone back here because my hair is tied up, so you'll be able to hear me now. Do you guys like what I've done for Halloween? Got some little pumpkins in the background. They're actually meant to be lights, but I got them from a charity shop, and the battery thing, it's like screwed in, but I don't have a screwdriver that can fit it, so they're literally just hanging decorations at this point. I want to try and find a way to undo that so that they can glow, but at the moment it's that. Anyway, hello everyone, welcome to today's video. This is a really interesting one, and one that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I was actually inspired to make this video by my friend Notes Reviews. If you haven't seen their video yet, please go check that out. I'll link it in the description because that is where I got the inspo for this video. This is a very hard video to make because I'm condensing my entire musical history into 10 albums, and there are so many albums that altered the way I listen to music and altered what music I was listening to, because everyone's taste changes over time, as we all know. I mean, I'm only 21, so I haven't experienced the full load of that yet, but I can safely say that my music taste 10 years ago is not the same as it is now. It is drastically different. I mean, 10 years ago, I was keeping up with like top 40 hits, I was listening to the radio all the time. Now, I don't have a radio. I listen to stuff on Spotify and vinyl and CD and whatever. But I know my taste, and I've figured that out over the years. Yeah, my musical journey is a very chaotic one, I guess. It's a lot of like coming back to, revisiting, and a lot of like discovery, but the things I did discover were extremely significant. Apologies for the sound of seagulls, but when you're living on the coast of England, you cannot get away from seagulls. 10 albums that changed my life. Let's begin. So, album of the day, I'm gonna wrap this up really quick. I actually got the vinyl of this today, so I can talk about this comfortably, and I'm wearing the t-shirt. I just got my Spirit Box merch in the mail, so I'm really happy. But this album is Eternal Blue, and I did talk about it in my last video when I talked about modern bands that I really like, which if you have not checked out, I'll link that in the description. And this is an absolutely fantastic record. Bands of progressive rock, progressive metal, metal in general, kind of metalcore, literally anything with also a balance of clean and extreme vocals will really, really dig this album. It's a really great modern day metal record, so definitely listen to this one. And without further ado, let's begin! I got into music properly when I was about 12, and that's almost 10 years ago, but up until, well, from my age of 12 up until now, we're in 2023 and I'm 21, I've listened to a lot of music. And the first one I'm going to talk about, I think, is one of the gateway records into the genre, and it got me super invested in the genre. As soon as I heard it, I had to have more. I had to have more of it. I was craving more of it. And I loved it so much that I even told my family about it. So I'm talking about Master of Puppets by Metallica. Now, this isn't actually my favourite record of theirs. My favourite record of theirs is Ride the Lightning. But I think this one had a bigger impact on my journey into metal because, I mean, look at the album. It's structured so perfectly. It's got a perfect amount of songs. It's a perfect length. I don't think it drags on at any point. And we've got a 9-minute metal track, which today's standards, that's like, if you're into progressive metal, that's child's play. But hearing a 9-minute metal track from 1986 is pretty mad. And hearing that for the first time, I have a story. The first time I heard it, I was staying somewhere, and at the time I was super into a band called Avenged Sevenfold, and I was like, oh, one of their biggest influences is Metallica, and obviously I knew the name, obviously. So I checked out the title track and I went on a little walk and I was like, what the hell is this? This is incredible. And I was just listening to Metallica for literally the rest of that holiday. So Master of Puppets definitely altered the way I listen to metal and just the way I listen to music in general. So, number 2, I promise all of these are not metal records. I really have mixed them all up. I've got my little checklist here so I don't drag on. So number 2, we're going to go a bit further back than Metallica. This is going back into my childhood. This is probably my earliest recollection of listening to somewhat experimental music for my age. Okay, I was probably about 6-7 years old when I was listening to a lot of this. I remember my dad telling me the story. We were in the car and he played a song from this album and I said I liked it. And this song was one that he was not expecting me to like, also because at the time I was listening to a lot of like pop stuff. But I am talking about OK Computer by Radiohead. This is, a lot of people call it the modern day Pet Sounds, and I somewhat agree with that because when that album was made, if you think about it, everyone after that wanted to do that. Everyone wanted to be Radiohead. Everyone wanted to make the next OK Computer, and no one has ever come close to making it. That album is such a standout, and I can listen to it over and over and over again and never get tired of it. It's my perfect comfort album. I come back to it all the time. When I have my first breakup, I listen to it all the time. Like, it's one that I will repeatedly come back to, and it always gives me such happy memories of my childhood and my family. So OK Computer is one of my favourite albums of all time. Again, funnily enough, not my favourite Radiohead album, but it has had such an impact on my life that I couldn't leave it off this list. Okay, number 3. Okay, picture the scene. I don't know why I'm holding the pen. Picture the scene. I'm in sixth form or college. Well, I went to college, but that was sixth form, I guess. And I was really into my metal at this point. I was really ingrained in the genre. I was listening to some heavy stuff. I stumbled upon a band called Dream Theater. Now, Dream Theater haven't got any albums in this list. As much as I love them, they didn't impact my life the way that this album did. So when I was digging into Dream Theater's influences, because they wear them on their sleeve, you can hear them, found a band called Rush. You know where I'm going with this already, I can tell. I was like, ooh, a band called Rush. That's a cool name. So I go on Spotify and I hadn't listened to kind of 70s music in a while at this point. I was really into my heavy music. So I put on 2112, the title track, the first track on the album. And I was just mesmerized. I was encapsulated. I was hanging on to every single note. And I had never heard the bass be played that way before. Now, I am a bassist. I shouldn't touch the microphone. I am a bassist myself. So hearing that album made me think, okay, so the bass doesn't have to be a background instrument. It can actually like follow along with the guitar as well. So it really inspired me to become a musician. First of all, 2112 by Rush. Let's talk about this. It inspired me so much to become a musician, but it also got me really into progressive rock. I thought, I want more music like this. I want weird sounds that were being done like 45, 50 years ago. Like, this is incredible that they were doing this at this time, and I was mind blown by that. And I remember going home and I was like telling my family, I was like, I've discovered this new genre called progressive rock, and we know the stories will come later. I've got another couple of, well, a couple of progressive rock albums in this list, but I was blown away. I didn't stop listening to it for like a month. I was just binge listening to Rush. I started going through the discography, and I have to thank 2112 for making me a musician and getting me into progressive rock. So thank you very much. 2112 by Rush. Okay, let's move back to a heavier genre, but we're going to an album that came out in 2013. Now, when I made my video with my dad about 1973, 83, I was embarrassed to talk about this album because I was embarrassed about what people were going to think. But now I just don't care. I really don't, because this album is so important to me. I don't even know why I decided to leave it off the list. And I am talking about Sempiternal by Bring Me the Horizon. Now, Bring Me the Horizon, when I was an adolescent, were my favourite band. I went to go see them live, and it was my first rock concert. And I will always remember Bring Me the Horizon as my first proper gig. And Sempiternal, which is, well, a lot of people think is their best record, changed my life because I'd never heard metal be made like that. I didn't know that extreme music could have like synths, and it could have these like kind of grand orchestral moments, and that album cuts you deep. If you really listen to the lyrics, it's particularly the last song on the album, Hospital for Souls, those lyrics make you sad. They made me so sad at the time, and the problem was I could relate to a lot of the stuff that was being written about on that album. I really connected with that record, and it really got me into heavy music later on, because after that I got into metal. So that is probably my gateway band, to be honest, into heavy music, was that album. Side note, I saw Bring Me the Horizon again this year, but I wasn't paying to go see them particularly. I paid to go to Download Festival, and I dragged Joan along. He didn't really want to go to Bring Me the Horizon, but I was like, we're going, because they are a huge part of my childhood, and I'm not really a big fan of their latest stuff, but when they were playing stuff from That's the Spirit and Sempiternal, I was almost weepy, because I was like, oh my god, I feel like I'm like 14 again, oh my god. So, very important album. So, next one, we're gonna go way back again. We're gonna go back to an album that was released in the 60s. I'm just gonna say it. Abbey Road, The Beatles. I think The Beatles, for a lot of people, get them into music. And even though my family aren't like ultra mega huge Beatles fans, they were one that was always mentioned in how they changed music forever. And so Abbey Road, for me, I remember hearing I Want You, She's So Heavy for the first time. I think that was one that my dad played. It's definitely my dad played it. And the follow-up song, Because, and I thought these are the most wonderful songs in the world. And I was convinced that these were like released in the kind of modern era, and then I was told, oh, that was like late 60s, and I was like, what? So I went and listened to the whole album, and I fell in love with that psychedelic sound, and being mind blown that music, similarly with Rush, like that was made long ago, before I was even considered. So The Beatles, Abbey Road, really important album in my childhood. Where are we gonna go? I know where we're going. So let's pick up my story from before, when I run home and I tell my family, I've just discovered progressive rock. This is the most amazing thing in the world. And I tell my dad, and if you are a long-time subscriber, you know that my dad loves his progressive rock, and that influenced me. So he gave me this record by a band called Genesis. Now, my knowledge of Genesis at the time was I Can't Dance and Invisible Touch, so like the big hits, and I had no idea that Peter Gabriel was even associated with Genesis, because never told. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? So he's like, oh yeah, listen to this album. It's called Nursery Crime, which is probably to this day my favourite progressive rock album. And I went and I listened to it, and I was like, oh my god, this is wonderful, this is amazing. And then I go downstairs and I'm like, this is amazing, I want more of it. And then my channel was made. Nursery Crime was the perfect balance for me of beautiful melodies and harmonies and just pure brilliant musicianship, with a little bit of goofy silly with Harold the Barrel. But, you know, my favourite song on that album to this day is Up the Musical Box. Now, I remember hearing that song for the first time, and it's one of those songs that I really, really wish, the whole album actually, that I could go back in time and listen to it for the first time again. So treasure it when you first hear it. If there's anyone out there who hasn't listened to it yet, I don't know how if you're not following the channel, but treasure it, because it is an album that will change your life. And it changed mine for the better, because then the channel was made. So Nursery Crime by Genesis, very, very important album. I've got 3 left, so hang on tight, people. I have 4 albums left. We're over halfway, guys. So I'm now going to talk about one recent one. So I didn't limit myself with this video. I kind of examined everything I've been listening to up until today, basically. There was an album I listened to while I was in Iceland. Now, I knew about this album because it's one of those like cult classic kind of records, and I loved the album cover. And I knew it was a dark record. I really like my dark music, and so I was like, you know what, I'll listen to it. Now, when we were in Iceland, we were doing a lot of driving, and you look out the window, gorgeous scenery all around. So I was like, okay, gotta listen to this album while I'm still here. And that album was Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life. This is a very, very new edition, but it really did change my perspective on music. I remember when I heard it for the first time, I instantly loved it. There was no doubt about that. I knew this album from the start of it to the end. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. It is a very, very dark and depressing record, but it has some of the most beautiful yet terrifying moments in it. It's hard to explain the genre because there's so much going on, but it's a lot of kind of droney, shoegazy, kind of heavy, kind of post-punky at times, but the lyrical content is just beautiful. And I remember playing it to Johan, and I had no idea he hadn't heard it before. It was really weird, because I was like, this is one he's definitely heard before. And we both just were like, yeah, this album. And I bought it instantly on vinyl, and I had to wait until I got home to listen to it, but I just sat there in complete awe. I'm pretty sure I welled up at one point and I cried a little bit, because it's such a hard album to explain. It's not a concept album, but the themes of the album are pretty hard to explain. I'd have to go back and re-listen to it and re-evaluate it, but what a phenomenal record. Shook me to the core when I first heard it, and I think everyone out there should give it a listen. So this is Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life. Okay, we're gonna go back to heavy music again. Yay! So, okay, at this point, I'm listening to a lot of Metallica, I'm listening to a lot of Sabbath, the classics, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. I stumble upon this band, and I remember their big hit. I listened to that Big Hit, and I was like, what? It's like, what is going on? And so I listened to the album that said Big Hit came from, and I was like, I've never heard any metal record sound like this. This guitar tone is so specific, this vocal style is so specific, the rhythms are so specific. What is this? And I'm of course talking about the legendary Toxicity by System of a Down. And I remember being told about System of a Down probably by YouTube. I had no friends who liked metal back in the day, but I watched a lot of YouTubers who would talk about metal and talk about music, and they mentioned, always came up, System of a Down. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll listen to it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I now know why everyone in this community loves them, and I don't know anyone who doesn't like this band. They're just a beautiful, chaotic band, and I just really want to see them live. I've loved them for years, and I haven't seen them yet. I'm waiting for them to come over. But this album, the big hit in question was Chop Suey, everyone knows that. It has the most beautiful songwriting and vocal production, and just production in general. It's got such a gritty edge to it, and I was like, I really want to do that. I want to make something like that, and I've actually covered a song from that album recently, and I'm debating whether or not to release it as a cover. If you're interested, let me know. I hold that album so close to my heart forever and ever. If I was stuck on a desert island or stuck wherever, I don't know where, that would be the first one I'm picking, because I've never gotten tired of that record. I listen to it over and over. I listen to it when I want a little bit of a silly haha. I listen to it when I want some really cool, hard-hitting riffs. I want it all, with some cool rhythms as well. I hadn't heard drums like that ever. So yeah, System of a Down, Toxicity, brilliant record. We're almost at the 25-minute mark. I gotta speed up a bit. Let's go back in time to the 70s again. My last two records are released in the 70s anyway. Let's go away from prog, let's go away from metal, and let's go into the world of pop. Now, I remember seeing the movie Mamma Mia when I was a little child and thinking, man, Pierce Brosnan cannot sing, but I loved the songs. And I remember being like, where do these songs come from? And then I see in the credits, because, you know, remember when people bought DVDs? Remember DVDs when they were a thing? No one uses DVDs anymore. Everyone just uses streaming services. But I remember getting the DVD of Mamma Mia, and I was reading through it, and I was like, all music composed by ABBA. And I was like, who's that? Who is that? And then, ironically, later on, I go on iTunes. Remember iTunes as well? Remember when people bought albums on iTunes? So weird time. We had one in the iTunes library called ABBA Gold, the greatest hits of ABBA. That is not the album, but I remember listening to that album a lot and thinking, I can be happy, I can cry. It's the same band that's evoking these emotions. So the album I'm going to talk about is the most important one to me, and that is Arrival by ABBA, because every song on that album is just perfect. It's perfect harmonies. They're the kind of harmonies that you hear and you're like, oh, it's so satisfying to hear. And I guarantee there's some sort of like music theory behind that I should know, but I don't. But they're just really, really well crafted pop songs. And I found at times they were breaking the boundaries of other genres too. They were doing some kind of rocky things. They were doing some folky stuff. Obviously, being from Sweden, that really nice Swedish folk influence was just lovely to hear. They were doing soul at points. They did that kind of like electronic-y stuff as well, with some dance hits as well, disco. Obviously they were doing a lot of the disco stuff. Anyway, Arrival, it has my favourite ABBA song on it, which is Tiger. It's not one of the big hits, but it's such a fun one, and I really, really love that record. So yeah, if you haven't actually listened to the entirety of Arrival, I do recommend it. It's got the most wonderful instrumental at the end, with just the build-up of harmonies. Okay people, we are at the end of the list. We are on the last album. Now I purposefully saved this one for last, because if I say my reason, is going to give it away, unless you're new to the channel. This album, I remember hearing it for the first time because I borrowed it off someone. I borrowed the vinyl, and I go home and I put it on the record player, and I chuck my phone out the room. I don't physically throw it. I just leave it outside my room, and I switch off all the lights except one, and I get out the lyric sheet, and I press play, and I knew from the moment that started to the end that it was going to be my favourite record ever, my favourite album of all time, because I had such a hard time trying to figure out what my favourite album was, because I got the question a lot. So I'm talking about Animals by Pink Floyd. I was mildly disappointed by the remix that was made recently. Never bought it. I did listen to it though. I want to keep the magic of the original. I describe this album as the perfect sandwich, because you got Pigs on a Wing Part 1 and 2, the bookends of the album, and then you've got this meaty galore of amazing music as your filling. And I don't think any record has ever come close to the greatness of Animals. Now, I already loved Pink Floyd at the time, and there were a few Pink Floyd albums that I was like, yep, this is my favourite one. Yep, nope, nope, it's definitely that one. Nope, it's that one. I have never been more sure in my life that this is the best record that's ever been made. And maybe you guys would agree with me. I was about to say you should agree with me. Maybe you should. but it has the most amazing progressive rock influence and psych rock influence, and just everything about that record. I've spoken about it so many times, but everything about that record is absolutely perfect. There is nothing wrong with it. It's a 11 out of 10 album. There is never a dull moment. I'm always on it and listening to that album. But yeah, the first time I heard it was actually on vinyl, so maybe that might have influenced my decision a little bit. But Animals by Pink Floyd is my favourite album. And it changed my life after that, because I was like, yep, more like that. I want more music exactly like that. Anyway, we are finally at the end of the video. Let me know down below what albums changed your life. I will try and get around to reading all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe if you're new. I keep forgetting to say that in my videos. As you guys know, I have a record store, family-owned business that is in the description below. I guarantee you will find something that you enjoy. Treat yourself to a vinyl. Secondly, I'm selling off a bunch of old t-shirts. If you want them, grab them. They're very, very cheap. I ship worldwide. And lastly, all my social medias in the description. Go check them out because I post stuff on there. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.